Hello everyone! In today's science lesson, we will continue with Chapter 6, What Makes Up the Earth. So open up your books to page 92. Last week, we learned about the surface of the Earth. About 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with water and is covered with land. We call these oceans and continents. We also learned that scientists study the different parts of the world using these imaginary lines, equator and prime meridian. Anything above the equator is the northern hemisphere. Anything below the equator is the southern hemisphere. Anything to the left of the prime meridian is the western hemisphere. Anything to the right of the prime meridian is the eastern hemisphere. We can easily find out about what's on the surface of the Earth because we live on it. But there's more of the Earth under the surface. Today's lesson, we will learn about how scientists study the inside of the Earth and what they found out. Page 92. The inside of the Earth. We can find out about the surface of the Earth. We live on it. We can observe and measure it. But the Earth is more than what we see on the surface. Most of the Earth is under the surface. It is not as easy to find out about the inside of the Earth. Scientists cannot open the Earth and look inside. They use what happens on the surface to understand and infer what happens inside. So just like we read, we can find out about the surface of the Earth. How? Because we live on it, we can observe and measure it. But what about the inside? We cannot just easily open up the Earth and look what's inside. So how do scientists study the inside of the Earth? One way to study what happens on the inside is by inferring from what's happening on the surface of the Earth. And inferring means we're using what we know to tell why something happens. What are some things that happens on the Earth's surface that the scientists can study about? There are things like earthquakes and volcano eruptions. But how can learning about earthquakes and volcano eruptions help us understand what's going on the inside of the Earth? Here we have a shoebox. Can you tell what's inside the box? Nope. If you cannot open the box, how can you try to find out what's inside? Maybe you can smell the box to figure out what's inside, or shake it. Can you tell what's inside the box now? Let's shake it one more time. By shaking the box, you can infer that there may be marbles inside. Just like that, scientists can find some things about the inside of the Earth when the Earth shakes. If you think about other ways to find what's inside this box, we can also find an opening, like these holes, or maybe poke a hole to find out what's inside. In similar ways, scientists can also find other ways to study inside the Earth. Page 93. Studying the inside of the Earth. Scientists study caves and other openings in the Earth's surface. They may dig large holes. They study rocks and how they form. Some scientists drill holes in the Earth's surface. They pull out samples of rock. They study the rock and record things about it. They record what materials are in the rock. They record what layers of rock are in the sample and how deep the sample was. Scientists dig and drill to study layers of rock. They sometimes work with other people who dig and drill. People dig to find coal, gold, and other minerals. People drill to find water or oil. Scientists can help them work safely. Then what are some other ways scientists study inside the earth? By looking in caves or other openings in the earth's surface, by digging and studying rocks. Why do some scientists drill holes? Because they want to pull out samples of rocks. A sample is a small part of something, like those food samples you get to eat at a grocery store. Then what do scientists look for as they study the rocks they find while drilling? They look for what materials are in the rock and how deep the sample was. And they also look for layers of the rock. Here we have a picture of the men drilling. And these large pipes are going deep into the earth. And from these pipes, they can get what we call core samples, which looks something like this. And you can see different layers of rocks. So here we have the man who has the pipe, and inside the pipe we see the core sample and all the different layers of rock. And just like we learned, scientists go looking in caves like this giant crystal cave in Mexico. And these crystals are very special because they are very, very large and even larger than the scientist climbing on them. Let's now learn about the layers of the earth. Page 94. Scientists think the earth is made of three main layers. The outside layer is mostly solid rock. It is called the crust. The part of the earth we see is the surface of the crust. The earth's crust is a thin layer. If the earth were an apple, the crust would be as thin as the apple's peel. The crust is thinner under the oceans. It is about 5 kilometers or 3 miles at the thinnest place. Continents are thicker. The thickest part of the crust is about 70 kilometers or 30 miles. It may seem that scientists drill very deep holes, but they have not been able to drill past the crust. Under the crust is a layer called the mantle. The mantle is much thicker than the crust. Scientists think the mantle is about 2,900 kilometers, or 1,800 miles, thick. If the earth were the size of an apple, the mantle would be the white part of the apple. The mantle is very hot. It is made of hot melted rock. This melted rock is what comes from some volcanoes. Deep in the earth is the third layer. Like the center of an apple, the center of the earth is called the core. The core is about 7,100 kilometers, or 4,400 miles across. The core has two parts. It has an outer core that is liquid. Scientists believe that the very center or the inner core is solid iron. The core is hotter than the mantle. It is the hottest part of the earth. So what are the three main layers of the earth? We have the crust, the mantle, and the core. Let's talk about each layer in detail. Crust is the outside layer made mostly of solid rock. And it is the thinnest layer. Think of it as the skin of the apple. The skin of the apple is also very, very thin. So crust may be the thinnest layer, but scientists still won't be able to drill past the crust layer. Under the crust, we have our next layer called the mantle. And as you can see, mantle is much thicker than the crust. If the earth were the size of an apple, the mantle would be the white part of the apple. And the mantle is made up of hot melted rock. At the center of the earth, we have our last layer, our third layer, the core. And there are two parts of the core, the outer core and the inner core. The outer core is made up of liquid. And liquid means fluid things like water, oil, or juice. Then what about the inner core? The inner core is solid iron. And remember, the core is the hottest part of the earth. Let's quickly review the layers of the earth one more time. Again, the crust is the outside layer. It is made mostly of solid rock, and it is also the thinnest layer. Next, we have mantle, which is under the crust. It's much thicker than the crust and made of hot melted rock. Then we have the core, which is at the center of the earth, has two parts, the outer and the inner core. And the outer core is liquid, the inner core is solid iron, and it is also the hottest part of the earth. To help you remember the layers of the earth, you can create this visual aid, which will end up looking like a book. So you're going to cut these two pieces, and then you're going to glue the tabs together. So these tabs on the side. And the piece with the Earth's surface will be at the top, meaning this piece with the Earth's layers will be at the bottom. For your homework, you will complete page 77 of your science activity manual. The first part is fill in the blank using this word bank. The second part is true and false section. So you're going to write T if the statement is true, but if it's false, you're going to write the correction for the underlined words. That means you're not going to write the word false. Instead, you're going to write down the correction or the correct answer to replace the underlined word so that the sentence will become a true statement. All right, so don't write down false if it's false. Write down the correct answer to replace the underlined word. Next, you're going to label the layers of the earth. So that's it for today. See you next time.